This week on Waterways, South Florida bonefish and Waterways Behind the Scenes. It's unlike any other type of fishing, sight fishing. Looking for a tail or dorsal fin protruding from the shallows, you actually have to see the fish to catch it. Bonefish are a frequent target of sight fishermen and are found in the western Atlantic and Pacific, mostly in seagrass or sandy bottom in warm waters. And in South Florida and the Florida Keys, anglers come from around the world to catch these bonefish. Why? There is a reason bonefish are called the silver bullet.
So what really makes it special in terms of the run isn't the speed. Other fish are stronger or faster, like the barracuda, is that they can endure that speed. They can run for 100 yards. That's a football field. That's what makes it so special too.
In the Florida Keys, fishing for bonefish is a year-round sport. The opportunity is so great that the fishery supports about 300 bonefish guides in South Florida.
But one thing that's real interesting about the Florida fishery is that they're big fish. In fact, over 70% of the world records for the bonefish in the international game fish records have come from South Florida. So another thing that's really interesting about this fishery is not only is there bonefish here, but they're big fish. I mean, you get the 13, the 14, the 15 pounders here. So it's really the one thing unique about this fishery, and I think also helps with the economics of it too. People travel to South Florida because they want to catch a big bonefish. You can go to other areas like the Bahamas, and there's places around the globe you can fish for bonefish, but can you catch the big boys? And this is really the area where the big boys live.
But with all this attention, long-time fishermen began noticing a difference in their day-to-day fishing.
After so many years of fishing, I realized that the bone fishing was declining drastically. Where we caught in Florida, somewhere in South Florida, we caught 5 or 10 in a day. There are areas now where it was tough to catch 1 a day. So Tom Davidson called me one day and told me that they were making or starting a new organization called BTU, Bonefish and Tarpon Unlimited, and what they were going to do is try to help the bonefish and the tarpon, not only by studying the bonefish and tarpon, but also by studying the environment.
Like other fish in South Florida, bonefish populations are stressed. Loss of habitat, overfishing, and pollution may be harming bonefish populations. But as the founding BTU members realized, there was little scientific data on bonefish for managers to know where to begin. One of the initial projects of Bonefish and Tarpon Unlimited was a male survey in 2002. BTU asked local bonefishing guides, is the population increasing or decreasing? The most common response was that the population was decreasing. But this was just the beginning of their fact-finding mission.
We actually didn't know what to think. There were a million theories, like there isn't anything that has to do with fishing. Fishing pressure, certainly one of them, and it is part of it, but also a decline on the environment, on the turtle grass. The fisheries can be managed, and that's what we're learning.
Even before the male survey, BTU programs began tagging bonefish in partnership with the University of Miami. They used conventional tags made of small strips of plastic that are anchored to a fish's back. These tags contain an identification and telephone number so anglers can call researchers to report the catch information. In 2001, this tagging project shifted to using telemetry tags. Telemetry tags can provide a more detailed picture of bonefish movements on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and year-to-year basis. So what's the status of this fishery? Traditionally, resource managers can look at harvest statistics, like with groupers and snappers, but catch data is not recorded for bonefish because it is a catch and release fishery.
So what we're doing here today is we're trying to catch a fish and put a telemetry tag in. Now a telemetry tag is basically a tag that gives off a pinging. Each tag gives off a specific code, so we can put them and know exactly what fish we put them in. And then we have listening stations throughout Biscayne Bay, on the bay side and ocean side, to really fill in those gaps of the fish movements between when it was tagged and when it was recaptured.
Bonefish are important on many levels, and they are an important link in the ecosystem. They feed on benthic animals like crabs and shrimp, and, in turn, they are an important prey item. Sharks, barracuda, and dolphin feed on them.
So we have 40 receivers, I like to call them listening stations, in Biscayne Bay, which I download once a month. And then we have over 20 fish tagged with telemetry tags out there swimming around there, pinging. So just basically go out there once a month and download, and then you know where the receiver is located, and then you can see what fish were detected by that specific receiver. So we can therefore, from the different areas that we have them throughout Biscayne Bay, follow the track of the movement, and then overlay on top of that, salinity and temperature data. So we can see how their movement is affected by changes in, or not affected by, changes in salinity and temperature.
While Mike Larkin is a veteran fisherman himself, he realized from the beginning it was important to get guides involved, not just for their shared passion for bonefish, but for their fishing expertise. By enlisting long-time professional guides with a conscience, Mike Larkin exponentially increases his ability to catch the elusive bonefish.
What I'm doing right now is calling one of the guides to check in with them. So if he catches a fish, I can run over and put a telemetry tag in it. He'll just keep it in his live well and call me, and I'll run over and get the fish and tag. Hey, Captain, how you doing? It's Mike. Are you out here today? I ran aground calling, but so you guys got one, huh? Cool. This is Captain James Koch right here, and his angler, Mike Marcelli. These guys caught a bonefish right here at Caesars Creek. Ran over, we're getting ready to put a telemetry tag in it.
Typically, from the time the fish is caught until the time it is released is about 10 minutes. All the equipment is sterilized to ensure the fish does not get infected from the surgery.
Comfortable. Got my stuff right here. See, these guys have, it's like a plate of armor down here. These scales are so tough. If you don't remove a scale, you'll never get a suture through it, or even get the blade through it. The first one's usually the toughest. So I'm going to remove some scales here. Judging by the size, this one's probably 6 to 8 years old. I don't think I can confirm that with scales. So I'm going to make pretty much the smallest incision I can, though it'll heal up faster. So I'm getting ready to make my incision.
Mike gathers information on length and weight and then tags him with an external tag as well. So when another angler catches this fish, he can report it. After the surgery, Mike places a powdered antibiotic on the incision to prevent infection. Then the fish will recuperate for a little while in an aerated cooler before being released. While this surgery may appear invasive, Mike Larkin has evidence that these fish prosper after their release.
We had 2 fish that we've done this on. In fact, one was recaptured 3 days ago by Bob Branham. A fish that we did a telemetry tag, did this exact procedure on, and the guy caught it, also had his external tag.
For years, scientists have been putting telemetry tags on other kinds of fish. Originally, they tried putting them on externally, but that increased drag on the fish, or the tag was shed. They tried putting them in the fish through the mouth, shoving them down their gut, but fish throw them up. The abdomen proved the best solution. Mike Larkin is also examining the correlation between the cycles of the moon and the passages of cold fronts on bonefish movements. And some observations were a surprise, not found in any existing literature. In one instance, a tagged bonefish moved 70 miles in 15 days.
One thing that's real interesting is the offshore movements of bonefish. I mean, we have them moving, we've detected them with our listening stations, 4 to 5 miles offshore. You know, like I'm saying, like offshore of LA Key. So, I mean, past Hawks Channel, out in the patch reefs there. So that was surprising. And preliminary analysis would suggest that this movement corresponds to frontal passages. So essentially these cold fronts that come down during the winter months and they spawn in the winter months seem to act as a cue for them to move offshore. Also looks like the full moon is a big factor too with their offshore movements as well. So I'm sure that affects the tide and their larvae distribution after they release them. So far we found the offshore movements, and we've seen a lot of site fidelity too. I mean, bonefish come back to the same area, especially in spring, summer, fall. But in the winter is really when we see those long distance movements, both with our telemetry tagging as well as our anchor tag, our conventional tagging.
There's something that everyone can do to help this project and contribute to the conservation of this magnificent fish. Mike's request: keep an eye out for tagged fish out there.
I mean, we have almost 3,000 fish tagged, and each tag has a distinct number on it, and it says record the length, the weight, the location, and there's a toll-free number on there.
For someone who has never caught a bonefish, it can be life-altering. In fact, it is such an incredible fish for targeting that it attracts the most proficient and respected fishermen in the world.
Start out trying to catch a bonefish first. That's what interests me most. Then you want to catch many bonefish. Then you want to catch a very big bonefish. But after almost 50 years of this, it works out that you want to be in the bonefish neighborhood, in the environment. You know, you want to see the great blue herons, and you want to see the clear water and the turtle grass and the red mangroves and the black mangroves and sure, the bonefish and the permit and all the other fish, but it's that environment of the bonefish, neighborhood of the bonefish.
It is the neighborhood of the bonefish that must be protected for the bonefish to survive. Creating concern and igniting passions about the loss of Keys habitats is a mighty task. But by focusing on the bonefish, a key component of the Keys economy, more people may wake up to the problems these ecosystems face. To support the fishermen who support Bonefish and Tarpon Unlimited, go to tarbone.org. To get a tagging kit, go to bonefishresearch.com. There are thousands of scientists in South Florida who constantly study the intricacies of the ecosystems and interrelatedness of the ecologies. Corals, seagrass, sea turtles, land turtles, the sheer number of species and their density make South Florida one giant laboratory. But when was the last time you read a science journal? That's why United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and the South Florida National Parks Trust bring you Waterways. Waterways brings you stories about the South Florida environment through sight, sound, motion, and emotion that only cinema and television can bring.
Before Waterways, it was called Sounding Line. And when the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary was designated in 1990 by an act of Congress and was signed into law by President Bush on November 16th, 1990, everyone just thought it was going to be a great thing.
But not everyone was convinced it would be a good thing. The independently minded Keys residents were wary of the government creeping into their backyard. Even the designation of Louis Key National Marine Sanctuary more than 10 years before was met with opposition. and that was an area 1/20th the size of the new proposed Keys-wide sanctuary.
There were opponents to the sanctuary that were out there just throwing barbs at us, and they didn't want the sanctuary here. There's a lot of people and a lot of people listened to those rumors. So we started the early parts of Waterways. The first generation of Waterways was called Sounding Line. And Alan Farrago, a local conservationist in the community, approached us and said, you know, you need to do something about your public image out there. You're getting beat up. And we agreed. And so we worked with the local cable network, and we had this talking heads behind a desk, and we would get up there and we'd take live call-ins, and Alan Farrago served as the host of the show.
When people thought of the sanctuary, they thought of the sanctuary as a thing, an agency, rather than thinking about the sanctuary as an ecosystem that would now be monitored and maintained by local resource managers. And these resource managers were recruited from the community. They weren't flown in from the concrete jungles of DC.
We think we made some headway, but we also at times made ourselves vulnerable, looking like we were promoting ourselves rather than trying to promote this place, this special place we call a National Marine Sanctuary. So a lot of people do not like to see tax dollars from the federal government going into what appears to be promoting the agency or promoting themselves. And I have to agree with that.
The intent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, as well as the other agencies funding Waterways, was to inform and educate. No preaching, no editorializing, no lectures. And they needed to get out of the studio. Whether it's baby turtles hatching on a beach or spoonbills feeding in the flats, there is nothing like the panorama of scenes and colors that exist in South Florida. It's one thing to talk about coral reefs. It's another thing to show them. And for some, the portal in their living room is the only chance they get to see this other world. Kelly Everman acted as host, taking viewers on tours throughout South Florida. With no narration, the facts relayed to the audience were always dependent upon the performance of the people on camera.
And there was an old gentleman that had
However, now, out of the studio, the interviewer could ask questions to the scientists and researchers in the field. The next generation of Waterways shows was produced, directed, shot, and edited by Tim Wilson of Keys Entertainment and Advertising. Kelly Everman left the show, and Sheva Heck, communications manager of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and Alan Scott from Everglades National Park took over as hosts.
People in the Keys use an average of 14 million gallons of fresh water every day. The rest of the story begins.
After producing the show for more than 5 years, Tim moved on, but Waterways would be reborn. The show shifted from interview-dominated segments to narration mixed with sound bites from the scientists themselves. The new format, which aspired to be a low-cost version of the nature shows one sees on the Discovery Channel and National Geographic, meant even more time in the field. Cameramen getting down and dirty and getting close to the action at their own peril.
When you're filming spoonbills and you have mosquitoes all the way up and down your arms so you can't even see your skin, or when you're out looking for saltwater crocodiles in the middle of the night because that's when the only time you can find them, you shine a light looking for their eyes, but what you don't realize when you're watching the show is that it took us 5 hours to find them and to find the first one, and the wind was blowing and the rain was coming down for a while. So, out in the elements with all this electronic equipment, it's a little nerve-wracking.
The Waterways show covers a territory larger than some states. From the Tortugas Banks to Big Cypress National Preserve, the Waterways show takes its audience to the swamps of the Everglades, to the guns on Fort Jefferson, to coral reef restoration projects off Key Largo's famed Molasses Reef. The conditions are always different and the demands are always stringent. Make a mistake and you miss the shot.
We are releasing these turtle hatchlings out in the blue water in the sargassum weed lines where they live the first couple years of their life. And before we released the turtles, we had to troll and fish the weed line to make sure there's no sharks or mahi-mahi that would come up and just snarf the turtle right when we released him. We're in the water and the boat drifts about 30-40 feet while I'm getting set up, and I get a tap on my shoulder. I look around, my dive buddy points downward, and lo and behold, there's 7 or 8 sharks, 5 or 6 foot sharks, not huge ones, but enough to make us a little nervous, mostly because of their behavior, the circling, coming up. So you've never seen me walk on water, but I did that.
Hutchins, originally from Massachusetts, brought a childlike curiosity to the segments, learning about the ecosystems as he shot and edited them for television. Sometimes, knowing you know nothing is better than thinking you know everything.
What's blown my mind is the fishermen out on the water, the fish collectors, the tropical fish collectors out there, the lobster fishermen. I mean, these people, they might not have the scientific data or the papers or the thesis or the PhD, but these people know more about their environments and are more in tune to the environment. It's like a farmer knowing exactly the way the seasons are because they've just been farming the same land for years and years and years.
The Waterways Show has become a public outreach venue for anyone working to conserve and protect South Florida's natural habitats. But most of these habitats are multiple-use habitats, meaning many people depend upon the resource for feeding their families and paying their mortgage. Therefore, the Waterways program has also acted as a forum, bringing scientists studying the resource together with the people who live off the resource.
There are people out there who are working their tails off to keep this resource alive, to keep spoonbills alive, to keep American crocodiles alive, to get them off the endangered species list. They're not making money. I mean, they can make way more money doing something else. They're making a pittance and living in one of the most expensive places in the country, the Florida Keys. It's just getting harder and harder to make a living here. But they don't complain. They're out there day after day after day, working for very little, putting their heart and their soul into preserving and protecting the resource that we have down here.
Researchers like Jerry Lorenz of the Audubon Society and Harold Hudson of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary have evolved as the ecosystems have evolved, witnessing the changes and reporting those observations to the public. But the message is loud and clear for anyone who has lived in the Keys for even a few years. In many cases, and from many stories, the show is preaching to the choir. Many of the people watching already know. It's the people removed from the scene who may be unaware.
What we keep hearing over and over, we heard this from the President's Ocean Commission, we heard it from the Pew Ocean Commission, education is the most important thing we need to be doing with the American public.
The Waterways Show is here to remind all of us that we must remain vigilant and determined to create a balance between humans and nature, conservation and exploitation, progress and preservation.